Hi, my name is Rob Cannon. I'm the CTO of Geometry Labs, and I'm happy to be here at REIMAGINE.
Hi, I'm Galen. I'm the CTO at MouseBelt, and I'm happy to be here at REIMAGINE.
Hello and welcome to REIMAGINE 2021. This is our 9th conference and a monthly series of events, bringing you nothing but the best projects, bright minds, and leaders in the space. We've carried kind of different topics and themes over the last year. Super excited to be launching a Game of Chains, Battle for the Throne, discussing base layers, layer ones, layer twos, basically what blockchain technology is all about. And so we'll be highlighting that, showcasing that for all of you, watching here. You'll walk away with some good content and education to kind of help you understand what we've all been working on for quite some time. So we've been fortunate enough to invite many talented individuals and teams to come speak with us, providing updates, insights, and all the above that's happening in crypto. I'll be your host today, Adam from the MouseBelt team, where we focus on early stage investments through our accelerator, or providing development support to a number of growing projects, as well as education within our MouseBelt University program. Our main objective and goals are simple. It's increasing adoption, use cases, and real-world applications. So, basically, we seek to educate our audience on blockchain by helping them understand crypto's real impact. Very excited today about this discussion. One of our proud sponsors, Icon, actually supports us at every event. They're one of the official sponsors. Lucky for them to be a part of it and providing us ecosystem projects, teams, and leaders from the community. So without further ado, I've been talking a lot here on the intro. I want to go ahead and introduce you to our next speaker, which is Robert Cannon, CTO of Geometry Labs. How you doing, Robert? Welcome to the show.
Nice to be here.
Awesome. I also have today Galen Danziger, CTO of MouseBelt. How you doing, Galen?
Happy to be here.
All right. Galen's going to kind of be a co-host, guest speaker with Robert. They've been working together for quite some time now on Balance Network, which is a Dapp developed on Icon, which we'll get into in a little bit. But without going into it too much, Robert, this is the first time of you participating. We'd love to kind of get your backstory real quick. Everybody has their own rabbit hole story. Everybody's kind of dove into blockchain crypto, through crazy journeys and all that. Tell us your 3-minute spiel on how you got into blockchain crypto.
Sure. My route into crypto is a little circuitous. I started off in oil and gas industry, actually.
Wow.
On oil rigs, and then up in the office, got my master's in petroleum engineering. But worked in the industry for a while and decided to dip out and start my own company focusing on AI and in the space and still blockchain. And so I did a lot of work in there trying to get that off the ground and really focus on DevOps. But unfortunately, that startup didn't work out. So I ended up trying to get a job back in the industry with data analytics, focusing on those types of things. Ended up going to a fellowship program called Insight, which is sort of where Geometry Labs got born out of. Went there to do a fellowship, and they basically do a lot of the same stuff that MouseBelt does, but more on the data analytics side, getting people just out of college or just out of their postdoc or whatever, and getting them sort of tuned up to be able to work in industry. So I did that program, and my project during that program was working with Icon, and so that's my real intro to blockchain. That was a couple of years ago. I mean, interested in it, didn't really know much about the specifics, the technical details, but coming from a background of DevOps and all those types of things, I figured I had a lot to offer and a lot of different skills that weren't necessarily as prevalent in the blockchain space as I really thought that they would be. I ended up working with Insight, focusing on Icon for a couple of years, and then out of that, we founded Geometry Labs. So Geometry Labs, a DeFi and blockchain focused startup. We work with a number of different ecosystems, Icon being one of the biggest ones that we spend a lot of energy on. And so within that, we've got a number of different facets of the company. We've got some research side. We're doing work with the QRL Foundation, which is building a quantum resistant ledger. So we got some cryptographers who are working on those types of projects. We've done work with Zcash, Polkadot, Icon, number of different blockchains, doing different types of DevOps projects and development projects and the like. And then also because we were really sort of like a consultancy before, we wanted to give ourselves a little bit more room and sort of like the growth trajectory to be able to build products and whatnot. So we separated from Insight. We're now independently run, and we have our own sort of like finances going on, so that we can delve a little bit more into products, a lot like MouseBelt, you know. So yeah, that's sort of the journey through.
Awesome. Now that's good to hear. And that's a great journey, kind of touching a little bit on everything, settling your feet. You know, good for you to kind of express or explain. You know, we have a lot of students right now, a lot of developers, right, trying to figure out the career paths, making switches, not working out. So it seems like a lot of hard work was put in, and you know, you landed on your feet. So you talked about you're talking about quite a few protocols, you know, that that you worked with, Zcash and a few others. What do you think are some of the, and we'll stick to Icon, like, what do you think some of the features that Icon offers, and what does your team do to kind of bring out those features, add to them? As you mentioned, you guys do a bunch of things. How do you add value to the Icon blockchain, because you guys do a lot of work?
Right. So we focus on the off-chain component specifically, right? So we don't really write smart contracts. There's a very exciting smart contract ecosystem going on in there and everything like that. We don't really work on that. We're specifically working on lifting events off the blockchain and then representing them with off-chain solutions. And there's a lot of need for that. I mean, if you think about blockchain, it's a database, right? But it's not the most usable database in the world, right? The interfaces that you have to sort of interact with it, it's really good at sort of like getting records and things like that. But when you talk about like aggregations, for instance, or you're trying to do any kind of machine learning or AI against blockchains, it becomes very, very difficult. I mean, you can't, first off, it's just impractical to really do machine learning directly in a smart contract or anything like that, you know, just too computationally difficult and whatnot. You know, we're still living in the kind of like, you know, the relevant, basically like punch cards for computing, you know, that's where we're at right now with blockchain, you know, trying to do whatever we can to get all of our algorithms to be, you know, just a hair more efficient and whatnot, you know. So a lot of the stuff that like a lot of people, a lot of developers are sort of used to when they're developing and they want to sort of use blockchain, it's not necessarily directly there. They want to be able to, you know, get lots of records at the same time, or they want to do batch submissions, different things like that. It's just not quite practical with sort of like the native interface of the blockchain. So what we do is we've built like basically indexers that we collect all the data that comes off the blockchain, and we do that live. So we take all of those records, and basically all those records are like transactions and blocks. Those are like sort of the base unit of a blockchain, right? And from all those transactions, you can like look into those transactions, you can look at the event logs, and you can look at different characteristics of those transactions and try to reassemble what's actually going on in the whole domain of the blockchain. So for instance, if you want to have like a notion of like an account, for instance, like a wallet, right? A wallet, you wouldn't, you know, there's no like, you know, thing, you know, data representation on the blockchain that says I created a wallet. You know, a new wallet is basically a transaction into an address that, you know, it's never been seen before, basically. That's a new wallet, right? So, you know, if we're going to be able to get like lists of wallets, for instance, and stuff like that, we have to be able to reassemble all that data that's coming off the blockchain in the form of transactions and whatnot, and try to like, you know, denormalize it into a lot of the sort of like domain objects that we're used to like understanding and sort of like interacting with when we're talking about the blockchain, as a developer at least.
So yeah, with these tools, how do you say that the presence of tools impacts someone wanting to build on a chain? Like if someone has these tools available, do you see a lot more people gravitating towards those platforms to build applications on them? Or are people working on building their own tooling no matter what?
It depends on your background and what you're trying to do, you know? So if you're like, you know, a JavaScript developer, you know, you're really good with front end type of stuff, you know, you're trying to build dApps and whatnot. A lot of this type of stuff, it wouldn't be like necessary for you to have this in order for you to develop on the blockchain by any stretch. You know, you're going to be able to get all your kind of data that you need to sort of like satisfy your base business logic and stuff like that with like the native interface of a blockchain. But when you're trying to do a little bit more, when you're trying to like see, for instance, a good example of this is if you were building a Dapp that was like a wallet, for instance, right? And you would be most interested in if you had your wallet, like say a balance over time, right? That's a pretty critical little measurement that you just want to see, like, oh, you know, if you go to your bank or you go to Coinbase, right? All that data is there, and it shows you when, you know, boom, deposited some money or withdrawn some money or whatever, you know? And so if you see a lot of wallets out there, you generally only see like the dollar value, right? The amount of money that you sort of have at the point in time right now. But to be able to assemble those high resolution plots is very, very difficult. And you can kind of see it in different wallets, right? Some of them will have that plot, but it's very coarse, you know, and it'll be like, you know, maybe a couple data points and it'll be like, you know, swirling around over time, you know, but like to really retrieve like a high resolution plot of balance over time, that requires a whole lot of computation that you can't really do in sort of like a browser or anything like that, you know? So like, I mean, yes, you could always build a wallet, but to build the wallet that shows, you know, the balance over time or different sort of like measurements like that, you're going to need to have the sort of off-chain infrastructure that's able to deliver that type of data in a responsive way and not just, you know, say query the blockchain 1,000 times to lift all those data points out to get the plot, you know, that type of stuff doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's been sort of the feedback, I guess? I mean, I think at one point, right, everybody was focusing, and you guys are obviously providing value, adding value to not only the protocol itself, but like the developer community. What has been some of the feedback on kind of how Geometry's been able to support, you know, Icon, and not only Icon, but others, but not only that, really developers to, you know, build some dApps, build some applications, build X, Y, and Z, because at one point a couple years ago, everybody was just building blockchains and they realized how hard it was. And even if you did build it, now you need to have all the other documentation, the resources, you know, the infrastructure, the tooling. So what's been some of the feedback, I guess, across the board that you've noticed from developers that, you know, might get developers to a better spot to start not worrying about retooling or building from scratch, and now just, you know, being able to rock and roll?
Right. It's a good question. So like what we sort of found was that like everybody sort of needed the same stuff, right? They needed the way of getting data back out of the blockchain, for instance, you know, that's like ubiquitous across any kind of dApp that you're trying to build, right? And so what we saw like before building a lot of our tooling, that like a lot of people were trying to solve that same challenge in their own unique way, right? And so you didn't really have like a lot of general purpose tools that were sort of like, you know, get data off blockchain type of tools, you know, that a lot of people were adopting and a lot of people were sort of like contributing to in an open source manner, you know? So a lot of the tooling that we're building right now, and you know, we're getting out there right now, is really sort of meant to solve some of the same challenges that everybody sort of already solved, but do it in a more sort of like canonical way, in a way that like, you know, can be more usable in other methods. It's more generalized. It's, you know, runs in, you know, the proper application formats and packaged the right way with the right tests, all the like, you know, bells and whistles, so that it can be used in a variety of ways. You know, it's like, you know, it's really hard to make software that works, right? It's really hard to make, it's twice as hard to make software that other people use. And it's, you know, even harder to make reusable stuff beyond that, you know? You know, we're trying to build things that are just sort of like more generalized, that like can be sort of like the building blocks to a lot of different applications and whatnot, you know? One of the things we did in Icon, for instance, was we built WebSockets, which didn't exist before. WebSockets are just an API that allow you to be able to get live data streams that are coming off the blockchain. And so we're finding that, you know, there's a lot of applications that like they, you know, for every single click, for instance, if they submitted a transaction into the blockchain, they have to submit it in, and then they have to, it's called like a spray and pray, I think is what they call it, because, you know, you push a transaction out and then you just hit the node like 20 times to see if it came back out on the other side, right? You know, and that's a really inefficient way of doing things. And so if you think about Dapp, if you're, you know, clicking on a transaction, that will result in like maybe a couple second delay, 6-second delay or whatever, you know, each time you're trying to, you know, do something on the blockchain. So what we're doing is trying to build interfaces that would bring that, you know, that transaction down to as fast as possible. And instead of sending, say, you know, 100 requests to see if your transaction went through after you submitted the transaction, to basically open up a WebSocket connection so that the data just kind of comes right back to you right when it happens, or as soon as, you know, we're able to lift it off the chain, basically.
Yeah, and as someone who's consumed some of these APIs on a project, some geometry APIs, I can say it really makes the applications come to life. Having the page respond to you instead of having to keep pulling a chain to figure out whether your transaction went through. It's just a more natural way to develop.
Yeah. I mean, I think we need to, in general, in blockchain, be like focusing on like the developer experience and a lot of that type of stuff. If we make it easier for developers, adoption is just going to go through the roof. You know, the simpler you can, like, blockchain really should just be like a middleware layer. You know, it should be just a little bit of code that you throw into your existing application, and then all of a sudden, it's not just, you know, you're using blockchain as your data source, and it's like really in the middle of your application. You know, that's
just part of the stack, right? Just like a tool, part of the stack that you can integrate and implement, which is you know, to leverage all the other technologies that are kind of booming. Shouldn't, you know, that's kind of the goal, I guess, what we're all going for. I have a question for the both of you, and maybe I'll start off with you, Galen. Like, how do we educate our developers to learn about this stuff? Like, obviously we want more developers developing and coming on board. You know, what have you seen, or what do you think we should do to continue not only like building the tools, but like letting them know the tools are here so that they can run with them and do what they wish?
I mean, good documentation definitely helps if people can find out that the tools are there, they're present, they're easy to use. But once someone's written a really good tool, or like a really good developer product, it gets adopted pretty fast. Like, even some blockchains that had, rather than just starting from scratch with the NFT boom, when they had slightly better infrastructure for issuing an NFT and easier ways to like discover or pull data out of the blockchain for them, everyone just starts issuing NFTs over there. As soon as there's a good tool that's useful, developers will switch from a bad tool to a good tool pretty quick.
Yeah, definitely echoing like the documentation and all that type of stuff. Like, open source projects are really, really difficult to build in a canonical fashion that are just like people can feel comfortable that the interface that they're going to build their application around is not going to change. You know, it's not just some like, you know, some crap that some developer threw together and it's untested or whatever. You know, there's a lot of barriers to kind of get projects up to like, you know, quality open source code and whatnot, you know. So we're getting there, you know. There's and, you know, good documentation, good APIs that do, you know, what you want, things like that. Self-documenting APIs with, you know, API specs, all those things are really critical. And there's just so many box checkers that like you have to sort of do to get good open source projects off the ground and everything like that, you know.
And what about like security and risk? Like, how do you manage when you're building some tooling and products for others to use? Like, are there mechanisms or ways to like make sure, you know, it's battle tested, or you know, making sure that it's not going to crap on anyone? Like, are these concerns or challenges, or, you know, are we at a point where, you know, things that we build as far as tooling goes are secure? Like, do we need to be worried about vulnerabilities and stuff?
I mean, yeah, you always have to worry about that type of stuff. I think it's a matter of like, you don't know what you don't know type of thing with a lot of this. And like, you know, you can build a lot of tools, and if you're really going to get there, you have to do the pen testing, you have to do the fuzz testing, the chaos testing, all of the testing and everything like that needs to be done. But, you know, on the budgets and the pace that we're generally trying to move at, you know, a lot of this stuff kind of goes by the wayside, unfortunately. I'm not saying that you know, a lot of this stuff is, you know, like, it's pretty secure. You know what a lot of like the basics are, you know, but a lot of the stuff like, and you're doing all of that, you know, but yeah, a lot of the stuff is kind of getting into 0 days and stuff like that. You'll never be able to really kind of get to the bottom of it.
And touching on the security a little bit, especially if you have a tool like an indexer or like an off-chain tool, you have many consumers of that data. Do you think there's a risk if one of these tools, maybe like even if it's Etherscan or if it's Infra or something that gets hit and malicious data is put in, is that a big attack target?
Yeah, I mean, I think about it for sure. I mean, we do all the enterprise like security features to kind of make sure that things are right. Like, for instance, SSH keys, like simple things like that. We create those on Cubes, which is like Edward Snowden's OS, right? For storing secrets, we use Vault, HashiCorp Vault, which is like the most enterprise, you know, secret store, most robust out there. And You know, every secret has MTLS, little things like that. It's a ton of work, you know, but those are like box checkers that you have to sort of get through, you know, to make sure that you're running something that people can't hack, because you're absolutely right, you know, especially, you know, in Fura, like it would be really hard to like hack in Fura and change, you know, chain data there, right? There's a whole robust, you know, consensus mechanism going on behind that, you know, that would be pretty difficult to get around. But when you're talking about centralized data stores and relying on that data and having people use that data to make transactions or decisions or whatever, absolutely, there's, you know, there's tons of concerns about people changing that to be able to, you know, do whatever they're trying to do or whatever, because it's a lot easier because you just have to access the database and update a record, you know. But there's like just a ton of like, you know, security procedures that you just have to make sure you're aware of, like key origination and you know, using proper secret stores, using identities wherever you can instead of like, you know, static variables, you know, or static passwords, you know, tokens all over the place, things like that, you know. It's a ton of work, but it's all like, these are not like unsolved problems. I want to say, like, it's like enterprise and banks, people like that, they've been dealing with this forever, you know. It's just a matter of sort of taking that stuff and bringing it over to blockchain, basically, you know, and seeing where it makes the most sense to implement. And for centralized data stores, it absolutely does.
You guys worked on a recent project together, Balanced Network. What are some of like the key features of developing on Icon, Galen? I'll start with you. Like, you've developed on a lot of protocols. The topic and theme of this event really is Game of Chains, Battle for the Throne. You know, at one point, everybody was siloed and you know, tribalism a little bit in terms of like, oh, just use this blockchain, that blockchain. It seems like things obviously, which is great, going in the right direction of like opening it up, interoperable, you know, collaborating with each other, figuring it all out. Galen, you know, for a developer that's looking to potentially develop on Icon, what are some of the things that you like, that a developer would like, or why should one build on Icon in general?
So Icon has some things I like. It has some things that I'm also not so fond of. But overall, I think it's a pretty good platform. So I mean, one nice thing, and it really differs from the other ones, is Solidity has been a really heavily used language. Solidity, and in particular the EVM on which it runs, is really heavily used in smart contracts. And Icon doesn't have that. They have the system Score. I believe smart contracts on a reliable environment, I think is what it's short for.
That's it.
But yeah, it interprets a lot like Python that you upload for all of your smart contracts. And Python, I'd say, is a much easier language to use. There's just a lot more resources out there. It's a nicer language, I think, than Solidity. That said, there's just so much of a wealth of Solidity code for blockchain applications and well-tested, audited ways to do certain things that just because Solidity was there first, it's easier to do secure things that way. Python, you just don't have a strong set of audited by OpenZeppelin set of contracts that, you know, many teams have been over and nobody's found a way to steal money out of it. Every single thing is untested and there's just a lot more uncertainty there. So that's sort of a downside, although it is easier to develop with. I'd say the blockchain in general is pretty nice to work with. It has had issues sometimes with uptime, but overall it's pretty fast. You have pretty good transactional throughput. The fees are cheap and it's easy to develop on. So I'd say overall Icon's been a nice platform to use.
Nice. Any feedback there, Robert? You want to tack on or anything, or how was your experience? Obviously, you've worked with multiple chains, and you can maybe compare and contrast to others. We have people tuning in that are trying to figure out what is blockchain, and we have people that are trying to figure out what blockchain should I use, right? Two different things. One, I'm trying to figure out what is a blockchain, and then two, I'm trying to figure out what's the best blockchain for me. So you worked with a variety of chains and ecosystems and communities. What are some of your thoughts, maybe at a high level, not only with Icon, but a few others that, you've taken away and maybe opened your eyes a little bit, or you learned more about, or just kind of, we're moving in the right direction as far as being able to develop on a blockchain. And we kind of touched on a lot of the tooling and the infrastructure.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not really a chain maximalist kind of person, so it's not like there's the best blockchain. It's the blockchain that's sort of like best for your purpose, right?
Totally.
Icon's interface is, their smart contract language is different. It's written in Python now, but it's going to be written in Java soon. They're going to have Java smart contracts, which is going to bring a ton of new features. And Java is the most popular programming language in the world. So, and this, it is like, I think, well, there is an EVM based Java language that recently got announced, but I mean, when everything gets released, Icon will have probably one of the most, built out Java-based smart contracting language, which is really exciting. I think that can bring in a lot of different use cases, particularly since Java is kind of like the enterprise programming language, du jour out there, right? Yeah, and Icon's fast. The interface is very similar to Ethereum. You shouldn't expect that things are going to be very different as far as like the outputs and how the event logs get dealt with and different things like that. There's a lot of crossovers from there. It's fast, it's easy to use. And yeah, I mean, generally it's like a very well-rounded blockchain, I would say, for its purpose. It's not like, going too hard in the paint in any kinds of like specific features that would sort of like edge out different use cases or whatever. It's just pretty generically good, and does what it's supposed to do, whereas a lot of other blockchains, they're just sort of like, slower block times. You can't do this, but you can do that type of things. Icon's got a little bit of everything.
How do you guys feel about chains being interoperable with each other? At first, I kind of just come to realize this recently, just kind of in general, like there's interoperable being able to like swap tokens, but then there's also, data, right? Like being able to transfer data in and out. And then like some of the security risks that pose to that. How do you guys see like chains being interoperable? And we're obviously talking about base layers and ones and twos. And like, do you think it's good for, either community? Do you think that like provides risk? One thing that I've heard is like, people want to their chain or whoever they're developing on to be interoperable with another, but it's more beyond that, like on the fundamentals. And you might see it more, Robert, on kind of, these different metrics of what should matter when you connect to another chain, not just for, hype reasons or whatever, but really there's like security, technical issues, philosophical issues, and it's not literally just bridging. So do you think like bridging chains is like a good thing, bad thing, or, to what degree do you see this as beneficial?
I think it's just absolutely necessary. It's not a matter of if you should do it. I think that anybody who's not doing it is basically going to, not survive type of deal. And you can't just create like little self-contained ecosystems and think that you're going to get all the users to just, buy into your one chain. It just has to go in that direction, And I think it'll be good for Icon in a lot of different ways. Obviously BTP, the blockchain transmission protocol, which is Icon's bridge, right? That'll be coming up soon, and it'll be introduced a layer of interoperability with Polkadot that should gain access to one of the more an extremely exciting ecosystem over there and a lot of activity. So in that sense, Icon is going to sort of like join the network of chains and fill a more specific purpose when that comes out and everything like that. It'll be part of the broader ecosystem. So yeah, I mean, it just has to happen, kind of deal, from my perspective.
Totally. What about you, Galen? You kind of feel the same sentiment there? Like it's required?
Absolutely. There's no single world currency. There's no single world financial platform. People just sort of use what works for them, and then eventually have to make them talk to each other. I think it would be very hard to have a single platform do everything that everybody wants. And platforms that don't operate well with others will probably be used a little bit less.
Nice. Let's move over to DeFi a little bit. You guys worked on a DeFi project together. What are still some of the obstacles? And maybe I'll start with you, Galen. What are some of the obstacles that DeFi still has, the challenges? Is it still UI UX? Have we come a long ways? I've been noticing like hybrid, CeFi and DeFi like coming together to aggregate. Is this all good for either user, or like what's your perspective on where DeFi lands? What 1 year into kind of after the DeFi summer boom?
Yeah, I think DeFi is a really cool concept. Definitely having applications, letting people, imagine any financial product, create a smart contract for it, and now you have a marketplace. That's really cool. You can test ideas out really fast. You have a similar concept with derivatives. Like you can come up with anything, write a contract, and it's a derivative now. And then maybe the really big ones get more like commoditized. But you have the same concept with just any parties interacting on a blockchain. I think some of the downsides of it is, especially in a smart contract, certain things just aren't as fast. They don't work as well. You don't get the same quality of execution as you would on regular centralized exchanges. So if you look at like the most popular way of trading money right now in DeFi, you have the AMM DEX. On a centralized exchange, if I don't like the price at which I'm trading, if I have a limit order, I just move to the price that I like. I come up with some here. I think the fair value is. I come up with. I trade at that price. On an AMM contract, my money's stuck in the pool. If maybe the rest of the world or a very large exchange where most of the volume is decides it's at a different price, I'm now just on the hook for whoever wants to, trade. I am on the hook to trade at the price in the AMM pool. So I think there's some aspects of things that centralized finance just has better execution on that haven't made it to DeFi.
Oh, Galen, you muted.
Sorry about that. I think my audio cut. So I think there's some things that haven't made it to DeFi, but overall, DeFi is improving quite a bit, and it's getting better every day.
Yeah, just to bridge on that. I mean, like we're such in the nascent stages of all this type of stuff right now, and there definitely has been a critical mass where you're starting to see like a lot of different projects sort of building on one another. Where you have like AMMs, now you're getting more options providers and different projects like that start to fill up the landscape and everything like that. And these are, again, just like, financial tools that people need to express, other real world value items, and they empower all kinds of different use cases and stuff like that. So, I mean, I think we've seen a boom in the interest in especially, DeFi with AMMs and everything like that. But you're going to start to see more and more different solutions that sort of like solve some of the pain points around that. For instance, like, doing speculative executions on different options trades and different things like that, or, monitoring your accounts and having, different pain points associated with that sort of like relieved. There's just a lot of different little things, impermanent loss, which is something that we're working on the side in Geometry Labs, dealing with, tools and instruments to be able to handle that, which is, one of those like kind of scary topics that people don't really quite understand a lot of the times, but they know they're going to lose a bunch of money if certain things sort of happen around it. All those little, concerns that people have to be able to engage in this sort of like decentralized finance system that's evolving and everything like that are just going to, it's going to be more usable, it's going to be more inviting, and it's going to be safer, and all the different things that people were sort of promised from the get-go in blockchain and whatnot. It just takes time. This is the development. Mm-hmm. Distributed systems are really hard, and things take time, and they will, they'll happen.
Oh, absolutely. I would say if I look at DeFi now versus DeFi 2 years ago, it's much better. People get better execution quality. It still has problems. I think, but it's getting better every day.
To kind of piggyback off that question, people are probably looking at blockchain and then looking at Dapp. How does a Dapp add value to a blockchain, right? You kind of have this blockchain, people build on top of it. What do Dapps do to create or add value to a blockchain in general? Does it bring more people to it? Does it bring less people to it? Does it help, create a utility for that token? Some people think like, what's the token for? Like, what does it matter? So maybe I'll start with you, Robert. Like, what does a DeFi Dapp or protocol, like, how does that impact a blockchain?
Yeah, I mean, when I think about that, I just think about it in the most generic sense. I mean, the Dapp is just business logic that gets processed on chain, and so it's just another interface for you to build any kind of generic sort of logic around the blockchain and everything and whatnot. For DeFi, it's just it's the layer that makes it all happen. You're encoding all of your financial rules into this Dapp, and so it's just the building block to me, and more and more of these dApps, because they're all public, right? All the blockchain code that you see out there, you can download it, you can view it, you can change a little bit about it and rebuild your own sort of, product around it or whatever, and so as more and more people are sort of building these things, I think sort of best practices are going to be like, sort of distilled out, and it's going to be easier and easier to be able to build sort of, your own individual, like decentralized finance system. Maybe you want to build your own DAO, or maybe people want to build neighborhood banks or different things like that are sort of more true to sort of the what blockchain is supposed to be and everything like that. It's all those little building blocks, and as sort of more of these different DeFi apps come out, you're going to see an explosion of different variations of it that might have been just small tweaks or whatever, but that small tweak was novel enough to open its up a whole other opportunity of different sort of DAOs and different decentralized structures and things like that.
But yeah, what do you think, Galen? Like, we get more dApps building on blockchains. What does that do for like the original, I don't know, token holders, like the community, the validators? Like, is that good for them if people are developing on them? Again, we have people watching this conference trying to figure out what blockchain is, what people are building. Why should maybe they, look at one chain or another or whatever, multiple communities or multiple dApps? What kind of value does when people are building projects on a blockchain, does that do for, the protocol itself, like, and everybody involved? There's community members involved. There's token holders, there's validators, there's nodes, this, that, and the other. Like, does that drive more value to everybody?
I mean, in terms of, if you want to see probably one of the most recent protocols that had a large Dapp layer come online, you look at Binance token, which was worth $20 or $30 prior to the Dapp layer coming online, and then was trading at over $300 afterwards. If it's a question of does having a Dapp layer generate value for the token, I would say it definitely can, especially if you look at them. In terms of does it give more usage to the network? I would say absolutely. A lot of these layer ones were created with the intent of launching all of these dApps in the future, and until dApps have started to launch, it's just speculative. It's saying I'm buying this asset that will give me, maybe it'll serve as money, maybe it will allow me to purchase computing power on this system, and until those applications are there to actually realize that, it's just speculative. And these applications give people a way to actually spend the platform tokens that they own.
No, thanks for that. And that's kind of with that question to both of you, just trying to paint a picture, right, of like why it's important for a blockchain to have some utility on it, to have the infrastructure. And we've kind of just came to this point now over the last couple of years of like people just building base layers and protocols and like nothing on top of them. to all of a sudden infrastructure, and people knew that, like there was no infrastructure, there's no tooling, you couldn't, it was a headache, right? And people are trying to find where they should go. Ethereum obviously did a great job. They have challenges and hurdles and concerns, but they still have a large community. Icon, same thing, like they're coming around, they have a Dapp layer, an application layer, they have a strong community, they're being interoperable, right, with multiple chains, which is great. And so that's kind of what I was getting at, really, like, if people are looking into the space, trying to figure out like what the purpose of a Dapp is, what the purpose of a blockchain is, what the purpose of everything from a development standpoint, resources, why, when one is looking at that, should look at all of it, right, to figure out what's best for them. I think we're all believers in a multi-chain verse. There's going to be a lot of chains for different reasons, and in general, and enterprise, and all the above. So the last question, before we wrap this up, knowing what you know now, what excites you, Robert, going into the future, knowing that things are evolving? Sorry about that. Knowing that things are evolving at a fast pace, what excites you moving forward?
So, I mean, I have to contain some of the excitement about things that I actually have an ability to work on, and actually change. And so, yeah, I'm really excited about a lot of the work that we're doing with Icon as far as the off-chain infrastructure. We're building out a microservice. I should remember who I'm talking to with some of the level of details and some of the technical stats. But we're building a full domain model of the blockchain so that all of the different components, like I think I mentioned before, accounts, transactions, logs, contracts, all these different components are going to be expressed in proper business objects that a lot of like enterprise people who are building would sort of expect that be around. So I'm pretty excited about contributing a lot of that kind of stuff. And I feel like it will make the blockchains a lot more usable when you have that kind of data properly decomposed into the right like objects and whatnot. But I just think in general that blockchain is going to just be more usable. It's going to be like, you're going to have more of those aha moments that you sort of like really aim for as a developer or, a learner of any type, that you're trying to sort of like get to the point like, okay, now I get it. I just put this little bit of code here and all of a sudden everything's persisted there, A lot of people coming from traditional sort of development backgrounds have a lot of pain points around different data challenges like consistency. Consistency is really hard to achieve a lot of the times in distributed systems. And that's just sort of like inherent in blockchain, And so that's like, as soon as a lot of like developers start to see like, oh, there's, blockchain is not like, a pain to implement, but it really just solves real world use cases that are pain points that I used to have and used to have to write all kinds of code around to deal with. Now it's just as simple as, integrating with the blockchain and whatnot, I think as soon as we start to like get closer to there and, kind of like really nourish those aha moments for our developers, that's when we're really, I want to say that's when we're going to take off, that we're already doing it, but just more of that. And it's just going to be more usable. And that's how it's all going to come about,
How about yourself, Galen? What excites you, man? Both of you have been involved in this. Both of you have been involved in the space for a little bit, and building things.
I'm having some audio troubles right now. Give me just a second if you got something for Rob.
He just ended.
I mean,
no, that's good, man. Thanks for highlighting that, though. I think like what does excite us is we are getting to that point where maybe, well, not really. We got work to do, but things are coming around that we could integrate and implement. We're not from Web 2.0, 3.0. That's kind of a challenge right now. There's a shortage of talent in terms of blockchain developers. Like, should you need to be a blockchain developer? Not really. I mean, there's teams working on that type of technology to, no code, low code, for people, business analysts and other types of roles in the space. And then, training Web 2.0 to Web 3.0, or are people just going to be native to this kind of environment, which, at some point probably, but still, like, I think like you hit the nail on the head. Just all of these things are coming together that kind of excite for, another wave of development and innovation. And like, we've been chatting in this conference now, and it's like, we don't know what we're going to build, right? Like, people are kind of building blockchain for Web 2.0 stuff, like legacy stuff, but ultimately blockchain is going to open up other business models, other use cases, other applications, DeFi, right? Peer-to-peer stuff that we just haven't thought about. Nobody thought about Facebook and like, you know, these other Ubers, right? If somebody would have said invest in Uber a long time ago of giving your car up, I bet you people would be like, no, like I'm not going to give up my car to, you know, for people, strangers to get in. So, you know, this is kind of and this took time, right? With the internet boom, nobody thought of these certain things. And same thing with blockchain. We're building out the core infra to get to that point of excitement of like, what are we going to do? So Galen, I think you're back. What excites you going into the future? You built a lot of projects. You've done a lot of development work. You advise a lot of projects. You know, you probably obviously see trends. What's kind of on your radar that, you know, maybe it's not here yet, maybe it will be, but if not, like what excites you?
Well, I think one of the most exciting things is just projects that are getting easier to use. Like when I am explaining, I was trying to explain the other day about how to do accounting and tell someone how much money by looking up their holdings in a pool, and it was actually really complicated to try and figure out how much money and this wallet they were monitoring had, as they were like putting money in a pool, taking it out. And just things that are getting easier to use and getting closer to the workflows people are used to at their bank. I think that's cool. I think the ecosystem's getting closer and closer. Every new application that kind of raises the bar there. And soon, I think it'll be things people are, you know, even who are not very advanced are comfortable using. That's probably the most exciting thing for me, just it becoming mainstream.
Nice.
Just to extend on that, I mean, like blockchain's all decentralized, right? And by its nature, it's like it's inviting to random people from anywhere in the world to be a part of, you know, and like the community that we deal with, like on our calls, we're, you know, talking with people around the world always, you know, and so just the fact that, like, you know, all the code is open source, anybody can get involved and people can take part in sort of like this decentralized democracies that are, you know, people are building on their own out there, you know, is honestly some of the most exciting stuff happening on the planet right now. I mean, that's, you know, it's what is, you know, it's the fabric that, you know, our future is certainly going to be made up of, you know.
Exactly. I think from giving up all of our data and information to what we're used to, right? Traditional user UI, UX, to gaining control of that back. As you mentioned, open finance, you know, democratizing accessibility into financial services, right? It's beyond just kind of, I'm in San Francisco, so, you know, I live here, and there's these other emerging and frontier markets, right, that now have accessibility and providing, I don't know, access to like Tesla stock, like, is kind of crazy, right? What DeFi is doing. And so I think that's super exciting. And not only that, you know, transparency, security, and again, accessibility to some of these tools, it provides a little bit of freedom for everyone. And I think this peer-to-peer technology opens up doors for a lot. And you guys have worked on it for quite some time, and you guys are adding value in a variety of ways in some capacity to make sure that we flourish, you know, together as a whole. So I think we're up on time, but Robert, where can people learn more about updates, insights on Geometry Labs? Where can they, you know, tune in to get that?
We got a Twitter, so you can tune for updates there. You can look at our GitHub. We'll push out a lot of open source code, so you can check that out. Any developers who want to help out and contribute, you know, get involved. Always happy to kind of like work on PRs and different things like that together, obviously, you know, but yeah, that's probably the best way.
Nice. Galen, are you on Twitter? Where would people find you?
Oh, yeah. Twitter, I mean, you go to the MouseBelt website, and then I'm GE Danziger on Twitter.
Awesome. So everybody tuning in, we had Robert Cannon, CTO of Geometry Labs. We had Galen Danziger, CTO of MouseBelt, myself, Adam, from the MouseBelt team. Thank you for tuning in today. We talked about a lot of things from DeFi to infrastructure to tooling, to blockchain's real impact and what it's doing for all of us. And you may or may not know it, but at some point your products or services will be touching blockchain or crypto. So again, thank you all for tuning in to Reimagine 2021. Hopefully you're enjoying the conference, and we'll see everybody later. Robert, we hope to have you back, man, at some point, or at least somebody on your team to do a follow-up and talk a little bit more.
We love it.